Welcome to Hard Truth Stories. My name is Tom. I am 24 years old. I met Jenny, 21, shortly after graduating from university. She was in her last year as well, and we quickly hit it off, and within 6 months, she moved into my apartment. Jenny graduated shortly after, and we settled into living, me working full-time and Jenny part-time. We started talking about marriage the following year, and then something happened that brought reality to a clear point. Jenny came to me one day with tears in her eyes. She was pregnant. I was a bit surprised as we used precautions, but nothing is for sure, as we know. I thought this would bring us closer together, and for a time, it seemed as though it did. But into her second month, she started spending more time with her family and friends, and while we still did things together, she seemed more and more distant. My suspicion started to grow as Jenny started making more decisions about the baby without me. Her parents bought her a baby car seat and sleeping bed. I said we should go together to do these things, but she dismissed my concern. At 4 months pregnant, we had a celebration party for family and friends on both sides. I noticed Jenny's childhood friend Beth watching from the corner chair. She looked worried and not at all her usual happy self. I went to talk to her and see how she was. She said she was fine, but asked if we could meet to talk the next day. She had something to tell me, but not here. The next day I left the office for lunch and met Beth at a cafe. As we drank our coffee, she said that she had to tell the truth and could no longer hold in the lies that Jenny was telling. I took a deep breath and prepared for the worst. Beth, with tears in her eyes, told me of Jenny in university. She had been with a guy from high school named Joe for years. Joe was lazy and had no ambition, but Jenny always said that he would snap out of it and make something of himself. It did not happen, and the year before I met Jenny, Joe had broken up with her and moved away. Joe came back to town shortly after Jenny and I moved in together. Beth saw them together in a car and eventually questioned her about it. She begged Beth not to say anything, and she agreed. Jenny said that Joe still did not have his life together, but she was giving him a chance. Beth asked her how she could do this to Tom, the man she claimed to love and was talking about marrying. She said that it was just for a few months with Joe to see if he would change. Beth was heartbroken but stayed silent, although it caused her great pain and regret. Finally, a few weeks ago, Joe told Jenny he did not love her and had found someone else and again left her, not knowing if the child was his or not. Beth apologized again and left silently. Jenny had been talking of marriage over the last week, even as she had been distant and cold the last few months. I knew now why. She was going to use me for money and security and then leave if Joe asked her to go. That life was gone now for her, and I was the second option. I started to plan. I had 5 months to prepare for either the child being mine or not mine. The lease was in my name, the cars were in my name. I had paid for everything in our relationship, and Jenny only took more and more. The lease to my apartment came up and I went to a month-to-month agreement. As the months went by, more plans came together as I prepared for what was to come. If the child was mine, of course I would take care and be the father, but that would be as far as I would go. Finally, the day came, and Jenny gave birth. Jenny had chosen her mother to be with her at birth. That made it easier for me. As Jenny recovered, I requested a DNA sample of the child and had it sent to a private practice doctor. A few weeks later, I was alone in my apartment. Jenny went to stay with her parents for a few days, and I made work excuses not to come. I had an envelope in my hand, the DNA results. I slowly opened the envelope and took out the letter. I steeled myself and read the results. The child is not mine. Feelings of both sadness and relief flood through me. Jenny had truly betrayed me, and now the planning of the last months began. I contact the apartment property manager and give them my 1-month notice. Jenny's parents had picked her up, and so I had her car. No, my car, as I owned it in the parking spot in the garage. I started making phone calls that I had planned and readied for months. The next morning, a company came and bought and took away the furniture from the apartment. A car company bought both of the cars and took them away. The property manager had a waiting list to move into the apartment and agreed, so I was free from the final month of the lease. I scanned the DNA test letter and upload it on my phone. I select all of our family and friends from both Jenny and mine. Over 40 people on the list as my finger hovers over the send button. I close my eyes and take a deep breath, and I feel cold and resolute on the inside. My finger descends and taps send text. How much time went by, I don't know. 10 or maybe 15 seconds, and messages and phone calls come flooding in. I see one call from Jenny. I stare coldly at the phone and start blocking and then deleting all of Jenny's family and friends. Jenny has called and messaged non-stop. She is the last one. I tap the block button and then delete. It is over. I look around the empty apartment. It is as empty as Jenny and her lies and deceit. The next day I step into my new apartment on the other side of town. All my hard work has paid off and I have a new promotion and big raise. New furniture is arriving and I am going to see my new car and finish the paperwork for delivery later in the day. I realized that to move forward, you have to let go of the past everything. So now I have a fresh start and the past is gone with all those things I had shared foolishly with Jenny. 6 months later, Beth stops by my office. We go for coffee, and she apologizes again. Beth told Jenny that she could not stay silent and that for what she has done, she could no longer be friends with her. Beth has heard that Jenny is living at home with her parents. Jenny has been looking for Joe but cannot find him. His friends say that he was talking of leaving the state, or even the country. Jenny is not working and just sits with the baby and cries all the time in her parents' house. I sit, no emotion and cold. I feel nothing for this woman who betrayed and lied to me. Beth leaves. I sit and drink my coffee as I receive a text message. It is from Mary, who I am dating now. She is sweet and kind and beautiful, and the cold stare leaves my eyes, and I think about our date later tonight. The past is the past after all. I let it all go and think of the bright future ahead.
My name is Todd. I am 28 years old, and I met Beth, 24, at the gym 3 years ago. We hit it off right away and began dating. We moved in together after our 1-year dating anniversary and began planning for our future together. Our plan was to work hard and buy a house in a nice neighborhood and start a family. This would require that both of us work full-time and limit luxury expenses and trips. It would be worth it when we could buy our dream home and start a family. After 6 months, Beth began talking about all of the women on social media making videos of their lives and how she thought that she could do that as well. I told Beth that all of that was make-believe and fake, and most of those women were just putting on a show and really didn't make much money or even represent their real lives. Beth said that her mother and her mother's friends encouraged her to do it as well and not limit herself to just a normal job, as they put it. I never really liked Beth's mother, Jean, as she was very materialistic and more worried about how much money people made and what their social status was, as opposed to their character or happiness. She had been divorced 3 times, as she never was satisfied with what her ex-husbands gave her and would endlessly complain that all men were not worth her time or attention. Now she was in her late 40s and only ever got asked out by men that she considered not worthy of her. After first meeting Jean, I wondered how Beth had turned out not like her mother. This was answered when I met her father, Mark. He was a kind and hard-working man that Jean had divorced a few years after Beth was born, for no other reason than to say that she was bored. Mark worked hard to provide for his new family, dedicating all his time and effort to providing everything he could for his wife and daughter. He would endlessly complain that she needed a new car, or expensive trips, or new clothes. Mark would simply say that they had a family now, and they needed to focus on their daughter and not worry about all of those things, as it is family and people that were important, and not status or flashing money around. A few weeks later, Mark called me and asked me to meet. He had something to talk about what was going on. We met at Mark's apartment and sat down to talk. Mark said that he knew what was going on with Beth. As I suspected, it was Jean and her friends, who were also divorced and very unhappy with their lives, that were getting in Beth's ear. Mark had a talk with Beth, and she said that it was Jean who was constantly trying to convince her that she was trapped in her marriage with me, and that I was holding her back. They said she could be an independent woman and social media star. They also were saying that having a family and children was just a trap, and it would make her unhappy. Beth went to bed confused and frustrated. All of the women in her life were telling her that what she had wanted her whole life, a home and family, was wrong. The men in her life were telling her that family was what was important. The next day, Beth quit her job to become a social media star. Even though I disagreed, I supported her and encouraged her as best I could. Every day she would make videos and posts, yet her followers and subscribers only went up very slowly. Beth quickly realized that it was hard work to come up with original ideas every day. Beth still had her standards and dressed modestly, which was rare for social media creators. Beth also began seeing more and more comments on her videos and posts from men saying and asking things that were inappropriate. No matter how many she reported and blocked, more and more would just keep posting. Even most of the women posting comments were just criticizing Beth or disagreeing with everything she said. Finally, after 2 months, Beth had over 10,000 followers. She was still far away from making any money, and the toxic environment on the social media platforms made her break down in tears each night. Beth came to me and apologized and said I had been right and that she had deleted all of her accounts. She knew in the back of her mind that her mother and her friends were toxic and self-centered, but it was her mother, and all she wanted from her was some love and affection that she never got. Beth is now applying for jobs and wants nothing more than to buy our first home and start our family. We had a family dinner at her mother's house, and as usual, the negativity and criticism of everyone and everything was in full form for Jean. Beth had finally had enough and told Jean that her negativity and endless complaining were no longer going to be tolerated. Jean stood there, silently with surprise. Beth went on to say that people were most important to her, not status or money, like Jean had always said. Beth told her mother that any contact in the future with her would be positive and supportive and to go get counseling if she ever wanted to see her grandchildren. Beth took my hand and we walked out and into the car and home. But we got home, Beth's phone rang, and we saw that it was Jean. Beth had a determined look on her face and set the phone down in the kitchen, and we headed off to get ready for bed. 2 months later, Beth was working from home in her new job when we got the news she was pregnant. We had a small party with family and friends. Jean was not invited but had been posting on social media that she was working on herself. A few days later, Jean called Beth. Beth coldly answered the phone. Jean had a softer tone in her voice than Beth had ever heard. Jean said that she had been working on herself and hoped to be a part of our family again. After a short conversation, Beth ended the call. It was a start, but Jean had a long way to go. In the end, we cannot change anyone, only ourselves to be happy and content in our lives.
Dan and Rachel started dating in high school, and after high school they got married and over 3 years had 2 children. Most of Rachel's friends had not got married after high school and had gone on to date many guys and became bitter and jealous of Dan and Rachel. By their late 20s, most of Rachel's friends could no longer keep a boyfriend, as they had become jaded and disrespectful of all men. They started to get in Rachel's ear, telling her that she was doing too much and that Dan, who worked hard and provided everything for his family, needed to do even more. Rachel began to become resentful as she saw women her age on social media traveling and going out all the time. When Rachel mentioned this to Dan, he said that their children were what was important and that they needed to dedicate their lives to giving them everything they could. Dan also told her that most of what those women posted on social media was all lies, and they were just unhappy women with no goals or direction. Eventually, Rachel started posting on social media the struggles of a wife type content. Dan did not know about this and continued working hard and getting joy and happiness from his family. Eventually, Dan found out from his friends that Rachel was posting on social media about their relationship. Dan talked to Rachel and asked her to stop putting their personal life online for the world to see. He was also worried about how this would affect their children, having a mother who talked about her personal family life on toxic social media sites. Rachel said that her friends were all on social media and had told her she had the right to be as well. Dan warned Rachel about her so-called friends who couldn't keep a relationship for more than a few months and then trashed the men who broke up with them on social media, making it even harder for them to meet a nice guy. Rachel finally agreed and stopped posting on social media. That made her friends fly into a rage against Dan. They said that she could do whatever she wanted and that she should divorce Dan for asking her to stop exposing their personal home life online. After a few weeks of non-stop complaining from her toxic friends, Rachel gave in to them and posted about Dan, asking her to stop posting their private life on social media. The post went viral, and thousands of women commented about her, Dan, and even their children, the most disgusting and vile things. Dan came home from work that evening with strong determination in his eyes. Rachel looked at him and then to the floor. "That was it," said Dan. "You have put our life and our children out in social media, and now we have all the crazy and toxic people on those sites saying horrible and sick things. You have two choices," said Dan. "Either you commit to your family, the only thing that really matters, or your delusional and twisted friends who only want you to be as unhappy and miserable as they are. The choice is yours." Rachel looked down and the hard truth dawned on her. She had everything she ever wanted, a loving and caring husband, and two children that she loved needed her more than anything. Rachel walked over to Dan and put her arms around him and apologized. She vowed never to risk everything they had built together over a bunch of toxic and jealous women who were lost in their own deluded worlds, denial, and unhappiness. 2 months later, Rachel was packing her and her children's bags. Dan stood beside her, also packing a bag. They were off to the beach for a family day of fun. As Rachel closed the front door, she turned and saw Dan carefully putting their children in their seats and buckling them in. Tears came to her eyes as she thought that her foolish and selfish decisions had almost lost her the husband she loved and her family. "Never again," she whispered. Dan was right, their family was all that mattered. Rachel walked with a smile and got in the car. It was a beautiful day, and they were going to make some great memories today.
Carol and Mark met in their early 20s and within 6 months got engaged and then married the following year. Mark worked full-time and Carol part-time, and they bought a house and turned it into their dream home. They spent the next few years traveling and enjoying their time together. As they neared the age of 30, they decided to have a child, and the next year their baby was born. Carol stopped working, and since it was only part-time, it didn't affect them that much. After a few years, Carol and her friends started watching a lot of women on social media talking about how they needed to make sure that even if they were married with children, everyone needed to understand that they were still independent women and that they need a life outside the marriage and that their husbands just needed to cope with it. Mark saw this behavior and sat down and talked to Carol. Mark explained that they were in their 30s now and she needed to understand that they had a child and that she needed to grow up and focus on what was important, and not what a bunch of fake and unhappy social media people were saying. Carol didn't like this and started going to a therapist to voice her frustration that things had changed and she didn't like it. The therapist was a woman who embraced the modern theories that women were never wrong and no matter what they felt, that men needed to bow down and agree with everything they want or feel. Carol started talking about this at home and Mark finally had enough. Mark said that marriage was a partnership and that, especially when you have children, You have to give up the selfish and childish part of yourself and live up to your responsibilities and commitments. These disagreements continued for months, and Carol continued to watch the toxic social media women and going to her therapist to gain validation. Mark was becoming exasperated with everything going on and told Carol that her actions were negatively affecting their marriage and their family. Carol went to her therapist and told her what Mark had said. The therapist told her that she needed to test Mark and that this would force him to do what she said and wished from then on. She said to threaten Mark with divorce and that he would fall in line and do what she says. Carol came home and waited for Mark to arrive from work. When Mark arrived, Carol said that she wanted to do whatever she wished and that Mark needed to agree and make her happy at all times. Mark responded that she had changed for the worse and was not the woman he had met, fell in love with, and married those years ago. Mark said she had turned into a selfish and childish person who turned her back on him, their family, and her vows she made on their wedding day. Carol then said that if Mark did not do what she said, that she wanted a divorce. Mark shook his head in sadness. His wife was truly lost in her own delusion and selfishness. Mark looked into her eyes and told her that she was truly lost and that he agreed and they would get divorced. Carol stood in stunned silence. Her therapist had said that Mark would back down and submit to her. After several seconds, Carol said that he was not even fighting for her and that they should go to her therapist and she would settle this between them. Mark spoke calmly and said that her so-called therapist was nothing but an unhappy woman who was brainwashing her clients to keep them in therapy for life to get all their money. Mark said he knew it was the manipulative therapist and the fake social media influencers that she had listened to and changed her for the worse. Mark turned around and went into the other room, already on the phone making plans for their separation. After 3 months of separation, Carol knew she had made the biggest mistake of her life, betraying her loving and caring husband. She went to the house to talk to him and ask forgiveness and to try again. She knocked on the door and Mark and his new girlfriend answered. Surprise on their faces. Carol's heart dropped and she knew it was over, and she turned and left without a word. 6 months later, and Carol is alone in her tiny apartment by herself. Carol sits alone and thinks about her regrets of going to the therapist and watching those so-called social media influencers. She had everything and threw it all away by acting like a spoiled child. Mark and his new kind and caring girlfriend stand in the kitchen preparing to serve the supper they had been preparing. Mark smiles and looks at Anne, a beautiful young woman who doesn't care about social media and who has not been brainwashed into thinking that selfishness is more important than people. They sit down to a nice meal and the bright future ahead.